gonna be a pretty quick video, I would hope, but I'm gonna go over things that I'm noticing, like starting off in the game right now. And yeah, I don't have like any crazy characters or whatever for the most part, but I'm building a warrior necro. And when we talk about part one, just in the me switching from my first character to my second character and testing out a couple of different options, I've kind of noticed how to make things a little bit easier when you go into the game. So like right now, I wouldn't be afraid to start off with multiple characters as you come into the game because you get to try out multiple build options for your character before you finalize what you want, and you don't necessarily have to restart and re-experience all the parts of the game at the same time, like over and over. Um, it depends on if that's up to you or not, but all of those characters that you start with at the beginning of the game, um, they are still bags because every character is connected through the chest. So technically, you can use them as extra slots to hold more gear or things that you need to save for other, champions and stuff in the future, as well as potentially you could find any item on any of those characters leveling up early that any of the other characters might actually need or be able to use. So although you're moving slower through the game, um, it allows you to sort of get a little bit extra gear as you progress, extra drop chances, and also the quest rewards like the gems, like the tier 5 um, skill gem that you could get. So technically, without even leaving part one, you could sit there and farm like those tier 5 gems and stuff through new characters and level up a character with crazy powerful skills potentially in tier 1, or although you're not gonna be able to get to max level. Like it isn't gonna be like Guild Wars pre-searing or anything, but just an idea. The other thing is, like, as soon as you start going into the game, so we're gonna look at my Necromancer right now. This is my Warrior Necromancer that we're working on and gonna be built. I got a build idea and a path for it. So one of the first things that you could do in the game that makes it a lot easier compared to, just doing whatever, is looking at your skills and seeing like what kind of combinations that you can come up with when you're actually using your skills. So for us, I started off with pretty much Contagion was one of my first abilities, and I used it with a wand. And this thing spreads to each minion after you kill the first one, and then every time it spreads, it increases its damage each time it spreads, which is pretty crazy. And we have Swift Affliction, so this does more damage quicker, so we can kill faster. And then if we scroll down here, we have Essence Drain, which apparently also it's a projectile, but it's basically the same skill. So once you put both of these skills on the same target, and that target dies, it can explode, or it'll die, and then it'll spread both of these to everyone else, which basically just amplifies the essence drain effect massively. Then if we look at Unearth for the Necromancer, this summons the bone minions, the bone like corpses, kind of like in Guild Wars 2. And these constructs have a short lifespan, but they actually are able to apply some effects. So the contagion and the essence drain that's going on all those people and dying, these can potentially pick those up and having them on their bodies while they're attacking people and spreading even more of it, keeping it even more of it going, so that you don't have to physically cast those spells over and over again. And this is part of the problem that I had with my first build, was that I had a build that worked really well and had crazy AoE damage. The problem was is that it was so animation intensive that I couldn't really focus on a fight because I always had to be sitting there and pushing skills. And that's kind of where this game is coming in, is where there's a lot of these crazy boss fights that you can win, but you have to move. Like you could get one shot from it. So if you have a bunch of animations and stuff in your build and you're using skills 24/7, you just you eventually will end up getting one tapped. So I'm starting to see the use of defensive skills that might not necessarily give you more DPS like a lot of other people, but they give you a lot more utility. So you see, we have the armored undead guys here for my necromancer, but we also started using bone cage. So Bone Cage isn't super good right now, but this just puts up a ring barrier around me that keeps small mobs and stuff from getting to me. It keeps them back, and then you can pin bigger creatures as well. So some of these melee bosses you can actually pin, like even some of these ghost guys in Phase 1. You can pin them and keep them held in place while your minions can hit, which is pretty good. And the next thing is like breaking down your items into components. So we haven't been storing these, but basically I've been playing this character for I basically made it and then I played it at work today, so off and on my work laptop, which can barely run the game apparently. I didn't have a mouse or anything else, and so I couldn't really engage in fights super well. So I had to change how I played the first time, which got me to realize how I should probably change playing the game the next time I go around. So instead of doing what I did the first time, which was just going and doing the main missions, hitting, 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 keep pushing, going on, and then my first character's at like the last boss on phase one, and he can win, but the boss fight is going so long that my hand is cramping when I'm using my mouse, because you have to focus on dodging the skill shots with him, and his build is so intensive that like I have to micromanage constantly 24/7 button pushes to try and kill off the waves, which just isn't good. So we made this character. But breaking down all of the early game items, so basically all these items that you can get early game, um, they work well, but they don't sell for a lot of money. So you're better just farming money for your early game characters and stuff with a character that's already leveled up, and then getting your components and stuff early for these so that you can upgrade those later characters to farm. And then if you wanted to make multiple characters, you could basically get one of them leveled up to the very ending. You take all that money, dump that money onto your starting characters. Starting characters can use that to gamble and basically buy power for the money that they have, without needing crafting resources. And then all of their crafting resources that they get early can go back up to your main character, and then the cycle just kind of repeats. And there's a few things I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was the scepter. It was the scepter or something that we had that we got from gambling at the very beginning. And so you can see that requires level 3. So this is like one of the first items that I got on this necromancer, and I'm pretty sure I got it from gambling. So 132 spirit, pretty good. 32% increased spirit. Allies in your presence deal 34% increased damage. Allies in your presence deal 1 to 3 additional attack fire damage. +1 to level all minion skills. That's pretty crazy. Alright. Just to throw that out there, that's pretty crazy. And this thing, I don't really need to upgrade it at all. I don't think, besides, you know, I don't potentially forever. The only problem is that it has that level 2 skeletal warrior minion thing, but that's fine because I mean we can use actual skeleton warrior skill to supplement that, and then potentially I can try to upgrade this again later. But all these other things, learning to like mess with crafting and salvage components, which I don't really care to do in a lot of these games, but I'm starting to in this game because I had to take it chill when I was at work because I couldn't really stress out my computer. My computer was overheating and shutting down, so I just went around and farmed a little bit, and basically all of those fights that were difficult on my first character, or at least somewhat challenging, became a lot easier with this character simply because all the gear and stuff that I had collected. So you can see we have these yellow gears for everything, right? And see, this is level 6, so I've had that for a while. Level 9, this was the new one that we had got. These boots and stuff, level 5, so we've had these for a while. So like all these I've had for a while and I haven't really had to upgrade. But really good items that we got early, from gambling and from just, farming a couple of items and trading from the traders. It seems like so every level that you level up, the traders like change their stuff out, right? In their merchant thing. So if you're farming gold and you really want an item that a trader's selling, a lot of people, they just farm gold in the highest tier level areas, but you can go back to where you had already been and you don't get any more XP for killing those mobs and farm the gold there, so you don't risk accidentally making the merchant swap items, because I know I've bought something from these merchants. I think it was this hat. This is the hat or one of these focuses that we bought from a merchant. This focus here we bought from a merchant not too long ago. So this had a socket item, and it's 37% increased chaos damage and some mana and stuff like that. But essentially, this was just something to supplement this thing that we got here. Which I think I found this one, but it gives us 26% increased spell damage, and then increase the cold damage, and then +1 to all of our spell skills, which is going to give us, our +1s to our skeleton warriors and all that, which gave them even more damage. So all that was pretty good. And then if you find any items on any of your characters that have like percent chance increase to rarity items found, just keep those and throw them in the box. Keep them stored somewhere. And every time that you make a new character, you just throw those on there. And potentially this can help you find more of these yellows and blues and stuff during all of your new players' playthroughs, which allows you to farm these materials a little bit easier. All these ones that don't really matter, right? And so you can just keep making characters that way. And then you get all your quest rewards and stuff that you can, move over to your other character if you really want as well. So all that's pretty good. And then there's things like this Sapphire Charm. Something that I've noticed as well is that when you go to like do a boss fight, if it's a really difficult boss fight and you're going to have problems with it, you could actually, farm gear that's specifically good for that boss, and then just keep that. So like the in-game boss that my other character was fighting against, it has a lot of ice damage and he has a lot of armor. So the armor, he's actually really tanky, so he can just tank all the shots physically from that boss. But his ice damage actually does a lot. But things like this charm actually protects you from the cold, and it has so many charges on it, which is pretty crazy. Um, so you refill this while whales are killing and monsters, but you can put this in the belt right here, and you can refill this. So these charms are actually really nice to protect you early. And also, some of your traders, like, I know that in-game boss has cold damage now. Well, there's traders that have really good like ice damage items and like rings and stuff at the very beginning of the game on your first couple of levels. But after you level up, they won't be there anymore. So while you're like, um, in town or whatever, you can grab those resistances, because there's like a 25% resistance ring that you can get like at level 2 or level 3, and I've seen it like 2 or 3 times so far, so it's pretty common, it seems. And you could pick those up, collect those here, and if you had 2 or 3 characters, then you could just buy multiple copies of that ring on those characters and get 2 rings with it. So there's power to having multiple characters play through the game at the same time, or if you wanted to remake another character after your first character. So I wouldn't be afraid to actually make multiple characters, you know, and play through the game at the same time with them, because that's pretty good. Um, the other thing is that when you're looking for gear, probably when you're starting out, one of the things that I wasn't looking for in my first playthrough, but you probably should, are these magical flasks. And I had collected quite a few of them in my box on my first playthrough, but I never really, you know, got the ones that mattered. So this one right here that I have, increased amount recovered 44%, but gain 0.15 charges per second. And this is a big deal because my other character has a really good flask, but he's in that last boss fight and my hand's cramping up and I can't keep my combo going. That last rotation, multiple times, I just wasn't able to get enough health to continue fighting and ended up dying because I couldn't keep my rotation going on my skills. And that's because my flask didn't have any charges and I wasn't able to kill the mobs off fast enough to get charges. But a flask like this could allow me to gain those charges faster. So the game really isn't so much about like rushing through the storyline as much as it is about finding these powerful items and collecting them and sharing them between your characters, I think, which is pretty interesting. And then, you know, because like I played, you know, the original Diablos back in the day, and like technically the only other games that are kind of like this I played like Baldur's Gate 3 and like Guild Wars 1, sort of. But I don't really care to like mindlessly grind stuff. But since I was at work, I just went and I kind of did some of it. And what I think is like when you go up into a difficult area and you're starting to have some trouble with the mobs in the area, and you know it's going to be a hard boss, just go back and kill all of the old bosses 3 times. Because that's what I did today. You just go back and you kill the other bosses 3 times, just rotate through them 3 times. And then every time that I did that, basically that's where I grabbed a lot of these like yellow items. I wasn't getting experience or as much experience. I think I leveled up like 1 or 2 levels when I went and did it, so I was slightly under leveled from the area that I went to because I kind of went through the storyline. Even though I killed everything on the map, I wasn't fully leveled from that area. And going back and killing those bosses 3 times allowed some of these yellow items to drop that were really powerful that was able to help me like become way stronger than I was originally. So that's pretty good. Um, and then getting this gear is probably the biggest thing I could see for like the strength of your character, because besides combinations of skills that you can use that are like synergistic and they work really well together, as well as these supporting gems that you need to work really well with together, and you probably want to get all the ones that deal damage as fast as possible, like increase your damage as much as possible. The same thing applies for like your armor and your gear, is that you need all of this to become as much damage as possible early into the game, and then afterwards you can start focusing on more of your defensive skills, which seems to help quite a bit. Although I haven't really gotten out of phase one, so we're just gonna go and like I'm gonna tell you like some deals just to get phase one, because I don't want to spoil everything for you on the rest of the game. But just getting started in phase one and then experiencing the rest of the game for yourself, I think is going to be pretty nice. Um, the other thing is like farming gold for gambling. The guy in town, he's actually pretty useful. Um, I wasn't really messing with this guy at the very beginning. I didn't care too much about him. But this Finn dude,
Tired of the slaughter yet?
he has
None of it's
items that
junk.
are
Trust
just
me.
random that you can buy, and then some of these turn into these rare items with crazy stats on it, which I think is where I got this scepter, which is pretty nuts. And granted, you know, early game though, these aren't as expensive as they slowly go up in price, but they're still dropping this. Like this was level 3. So I paid like 200 or 300 gold or whatever early game for, you know, this and got this scepter, which is pretty nice. And then he has like these random rings and amulets and stuff you can get as well.
Bye then.
But that guy's pretty crazy. So, but anytime that there's something in these shops that I see that I would want on my character, like I just
Sorry,
happen to go and
I've
like
collected
look in
these over
here.
time. What do you think?
Accuracy rating, 4 skeletal warrior minions. They deal additional 1 to 3 attack fire damage and increased crit damage, so that could be pretty good. But this right here, if I wanted to go and get that, or this one that gives me 5 skeleton warrior minions, basically you just go farm all of the minions that don't do anything. 15% increased spell damage, pretty nice. But yeah, you go back to those early areas and you farm the gold off of the early areas so you don't get any experience for it. And it keeps these guys from leveling and trading all the stuff that was in here. Which is pretty nice. And then socket items, rare items, effectiveness or whatever it is on your weapons. They're all kind of, you know, recyclable things that you can use.
I've collected
so
these
you can
over
see
time.
like
What
this
do you
item
think?
right
Yes.
here. I've been rocking with this focus for a while. This is one of the first items that I ended up getting, or I bought this from a trader or found it or something. But it was giving me like maximum energy shield and some other stuff, like mana regeneration. So I used this for a long time, and now I swapped it out for damage bonus. So I don't really need this anymore. But instead of like selling this because it's an early game item and only sells for like, you know, a few hundred gold, you can just get one of these regal shards. So every time like something is, you know, used and I don't need it anymore and it's not super powerful, I'd probably just recycle this now and then just collect those pieces off of it. But like this scepter, if I decided not to use this, or this focus, if I decided not to do that, I would probably keep it in storage because, I mean, this focus is pretty useful, and if I ever decided to do like a sorcerer or something, this would be a really nice item to have, you know, because that's like 50-60% increased damage, which is pretty nice. So those small items you keep in your stash. But these like socket items, I got a robe that I found. This was a scepter I was originally going to use on this character because it had 5 skeleton warriors, but I'll probably end up getting rid of this. But we got like a few of these socketed items that we found, and in this I accidentally put a gem on. But this is another thing, is that these runes here, so this one gives you 20% increased physical damage, and then 20% increased armor, evasion, and energy shield if put on an armor, which is pretty nuts. And I don't have any of these on my warrior guy, my first one that I built, because I wasn't super worried about it. But I figured out, because I went in and I started farming, that you can actually find these in the crypts early game. So if you spend the time to go around and farm your areas in each of the paths, you notice that there's certain items that start dropping a little bit more frequently. And so I find a lot of these ruins in the crypts. So the storm ruins and stuff, weapon damage is 1 to 20 lightning damage, armor 12% lightning resistance. And what are the odds that you're going to need a, you know, a lightning or a cold or a fire resistant armor set in the future, or a multitude of them, a different armor set for those kind of bosses? Probably pretty good. So even if you find some of these on your characters as you play through, having a few of these saved up could be really good. That way you can just slot them onto your armor and you're good to go. And now that I know where to get them, it isn't really, they don't drop all the time, but I mean, it's fairly common enough. I don't know how many I got here now, but I know I started saving them up. So we have 2 desert runes, so we got some for fire, and then we got 2 lightning runes. You know, and then we have like these rings and stuff that you can get, so this fire resistance. And then when you have some cold resistance, so we have 2 cold resistance runes as well, so this would help with that final boss. But the other thing is that if you have multiple characters, you get your quest rewards for multiple characters, and pretty early on you can get these things. So you get these charms, So this one's like the sapphire charm, but this one's for lightning. So you can get multiple copies of these, which is pretty interesting. And then if you could ever slot multiples on your belt, it'd be good. So if you made like 3 characters, you could have, you know, 3 different resistances and stuff on there. The other thing is, like, when you are going to do the salvage stuff or the bosses and things. So like I went from here and then I basically farmed this boss and this boss 3 times. And then I went up here and farmed these bosses 3 times. And then we went up here, and at that point I started trying to finish these missions up here. And the Tomb of the Consort is the female ghost. She is actually easier to kill than this guy. She just has a bunch of ranged abilities, and she doesn't really call in backup like he does. He calls her in. So this one you're fighting both of them. This one you're fighting just one, basically. And so you can just kind of kite her around and beat her up, and you're good to go. This one, you can pretty much do the same thing where you can kite him around, but you can still kind of fight him early. It's just he is a lot more annoying to deal with, and since I was using my laptop and didn't even have a mouse, and I could barely move my character, I couldn't afford to try and like outskill these guys, so we just had to like wing it. And pretty much this build has handled both of them perfectly fine. I used more archers on this one. I didn't use more archers on this one, but that's not too big of a deal. And now you can see that I have the keys to finish this quest line, but I'm killing these 2 a couple of times before I move on. So I'm going to kill these guys 3 or 4 times before I go into the next area, because that's going to give me a couple of items and stuff. And then we go into this, and I get to see what's over here, which I haven't really, you know, messed with. On my first character, I didn't even go to this village and, like, set up the forge or whatever. I just went straight towards, like, the final boss areas and stuff and never really did anything with it. The male ghost over here as well, he's susceptible to, like, crowd control. So the pinning effects and stuff, you could actually pin him down, which is pretty handy. But after you get like a bunch of your damage bonus items, he's not really that big of a deal. And then just to double do this, the rare items, like 9% increased rarity of items found, and there's 9% rarity of items found. Anytime you find these, you should keep them and basically store them in your chest, and you should be good. I actually had found another one of these, and I accidentally sold it. So I had found another hood. So out of my characters going through the starting zone, I had like 4 characters I did the first areas with. I found 3 items that could give me % chance to find stuff. And that's pretty good. So if I had that other helmet, which was like another 9%, then I'd be floating at like 27% increased chance to find good items.
Hey.
And I'm pretty sure I got
Take
that
a punt.
helmet either
You know
from
you
this
want to.
guy or I bought it from her.
Watch yourself out there.
Hello.
I don't remember. But I think the increased % chance to find good stuff is part of the way that I ended up getting these really cool items here. So that's just some stuff to really think about, and those are kind of tips to deal with like the 2 kind of harder bosses for the most part. Leveling is basically the main thing. As for the wolf boss that like shoots ice and stuff like that, he is also skill shot focused. So his stuff, you can dodge like 90% of it and just poke him at range, and he's perfectly easy enough to deal with. But his intermissions, where he summons a bunch of wolves, is where you need a lot of wave clear, or you need a skill that can peel all of the wolves off of you. And so that's probably your big one. But killing those wolves also recharges your flask. So probably one of the most important things to have is just a good flask that can recharge ability. But if you have enough wave clear and damage, you can also deal with that. So that's something to think of. And as for like builds and stuff like that, if you want to try this Warrior Necromancer build that I'm building right now, the main thing, early game, it's just a combination of skills. So you can use whatever minions and stuff that you want. I'm going to be going for like explosive melee minions, but it's a combination of Contagion and Essence Drain, and then you get at least one Skeleton Archer, gives you the Poison Cloud, and then we did have Lacerate on our AoE defensive skill, but you can put Lacerate on something. We have it on these Skeleton Warriors here, and that's basically what we've been doing. But so our Warriors put Bleed on things. You could put Archers with Bleed. You could put your Bone Blast with Bleed, or your Unearth, put Bleed on that, and you just put massive AoE Bleed on stuff, which is pretty interesting. Deals an extra 100% while the target is moving, or if the bleeding is aggravated. Interesting. But yeah, and also I'm pretty sure you can double stack up on these things, but something with the Necromancer, when I'm using the Warriors, everyone else online basically tells you not to use both of the Warrior skills and just use the Scepter ones. But for my build in particular, we're trying to get more Warriors, and we're gonna make a pretty strategic setup of minions instead of like a massive force. And swapping these, so like I wasn't sure if these would work together, but basically I'm pretty sure minion instability and last gas do work together, so they will still explode. I'm not 100%. That's part of the reason why I separated them originally, to test things. But I also noticed is that when your minions die, it sets a respawn of like 7 or 8 seconds, and if another minion dies, it resets the respawn. So if I have Skeleton Warriors here and Skeleton Warriors here, and they're all dying repeatedly one after another, boom, 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 well, then it takes forever for them to respawn. But if you have these doing damage and then they explode, they start the reset timer. And then this group here will end up still being in the fight and absorb the damage for another 4 seconds, which sometimes is enough to actually let them respawn. So having 2 waves of Skeleton Warriors is actually not too bad. And I don't need that many archers. So like, for instance, if I walk up here, I can do this. I ain't gonna fight them. I'll just let my things do what they do. But essentially these guys will run, and then this guy will just sit here and take poke shots. But you can sit there and spread the poison to kind of get things going. And then see, that's one of them exploding right there. So every time they die, it resets this. But those other 3 have that 4-second delay. So that one couldn't die because it had that 4-second delay timer. Whereas if they all had the 4-second delay timer, then they all would have died pretty much at the same time, which could be a positive or a negative depending on how you want it. But you probably don't want all of your minions dying at the same time. Could be something to note. The problem is I'm only going to be able to get like, I don't know, 75% recharge rate if I really wanted to. But actual Necromancer or like a Witch can probably get like 100%, which reducing that 50% would get us to like 4 seconds, which I'd be fine with, so I'm fine with that. But you see, those guys are fighting, they have the other passive. These guys respawned because the other ones were immune to damage. So, seconds, it reset. These guys are tanking it. So we got one more that died. He's still alive, tanking it. Alright. And the reason that
Fear will best you!
the reason why we still have the archer, one is the poison gas, but two is it has extremely long range. So with the minions, trying to be safe as a necromancer, I think is going to be really good if you want to be a necromancer starting the game. And this archer's range allows you to engage fights outside of your view distance, and then your minions will run and engage that fight away from you, which doesn't really let your group aggro as much, right? And then you can do things like this, where you can like trigger that. But you see, like, they're around here by themselves.
No warrior. In the right hands, this could forge something truly exceptional.
I don't know what that is. Okay, I was a little lost on that. E. See, we're not even using like all of our combos on this, and so we can basically run over most things right now. But this area also has a lot of these chests we can drop you loot, and they have normal bosses that spawn in here that can drop loot as well. So all that's a big bonus for me when you actually are going to come in here. So early game, this is all I would be doing basically to get your gear for your character before you move on from the crypts. I think it's just a solid idea to do that. As for the bleed, it'd probably be better for us to put the bleed on Earth. I'm not sure how that works though, because any skills that hit enemies give a chance to inflict bleeding, and this would do it, but I don't know if it would give it to the constructs, so be something interesting to test. The main difference though is that when you're fighting a boss, the warriors can inflict the bleeding pretty effectively, whereas the constructs you won't be able to summon all the time, so probably just get multiples of that. But we're gonna hop off of here, and y'all guys have a good one. Good luck.